Alright guys, y'all have only ever seen me on the water before, but we just got a ton of rain. All the rivers blew out, so there's nowhere for me to really go and fish today. So I fish pretty much exclusively my own flies. So I figured I'd try my hand at a tying video, and we're going to start out with a fly you guys have seen me fish a lot. It is my jig leech. I guess it's my own fly. It basically follows a bunch of the stuff other folks have already done, but it's my own in the sense that I made it up for where I'm at and based on the materials that I already have. So this fly is maybe my #1 producer, so let's get cracking. Okay, so today we're tying on a size 8 fulling mill 50-45 jig hook with a 4.6 mil gold tungsten bead. So a lot of guys, so I'm just going straight to wrapping the thread on here. A lot of guys like to put some lead wire on there or lead free wire and push it up under the bead, add some extra weight. I don't like to do that because I find that when I have that extra weight on there, I lose a lot more fish, and the 4.6 mil bead does the trick by itself. So when you've got a lot of weight on the front of the fly, if a fish gets up, especially if it jumps, gets a lot of head shaking going on, then this weight at the front acts like a lever and will pull that hook out, so I lose a lot of fish that way. All right, before we get too much further into this, I'm not a very advanced YouTuber yet, so my editing software, my Wi-Fi, my computer, not the best. So it's hard for me to upload very long clips, so I'm gonna be starting and stopping a little bit in here, so just fair warning. All right, so I've got my thread on there, and I don't even walk it all the way back to the end. You don't really need to, maybe just a little bit past the point of the hook here. Then you throw a dubbing loop in. This is going to be a pretty simple fly. I fish a lot, so that means if you're fishing hard, that means you're going to have to be risking your flies because the fish are in tough places. So I also lose a good amount of flies. So I like flies that I can bang out pretty quick. So dubbing loop in there, wrap my thread forward, and then I just throw a 2-turn whip finish in here so that I can really make full use of the rotary function on this vise as I work that dubbing forward. So for my dubbing, my preference is, so this is overall going to be a black and red fly, which is one of my favorite colors for trout and steelhead. My preference here would be a dubbing that's just black and red, but I don't have any of that on hand, and I haven't been able to get any the last couple times I went to the fly shop. So we're using Hairline Ice Dub Midnight Fire. Now I like, this particular dub has pretty long fibers, which I like. I like to pull out a pretty good chunk here. You can always not use all of it, but it's hard to, you can't really add more dubbing to a dubbing loop. So decent chunk. Switch that over to my left hand, and then because this one is not pure black and red, it's black red with some blue in there, and the rest of the materials I'm using are going to be all red. I like to up the black in the fly, so I pull out a decent chunk of black peacock ice dub, and then I just put that right over the top of that dubbing, rip it all in half. I just like to go one time. I know a lot of guys will go a bunch, but just one for me. Then I hook my dubbing spinner in there, dubbing in the loop, and I like to snug it up. This loop is a little longer than I'd like, but I like to snug it up pretty close to the shank. That way I don't have to wrap a bunch of extra thread on there before I'm getting my dubbing on. I like to give it one good spin, work that up in there, a second good spin. So 2 nice, good hard spins. Spin that up, and then I take my dubbing brush and work it open just a little bit. So I didn't used to have a dubbing brush. I have never had a ton of money, so I've gathered all my materials and tools over time. So then I do one more good spin and I brush it out even harder. But yeah, I didn't used to have a dubbing brush. And I'll tell you what, you really don't need one. You can kind of just pick it out with your fingernails or a bodkin or whatever. And it fishes just as well. It just doesn't look quite as nice. So anyways, bulk that out pretty good. And then pull all the fibers back like that. So some guys will wet their, like lick their fingers or dip them in water, and that keeps everything nice and in line. But then I lose my understanding of what's really going on in there. So I like to just keep it all dry. Next, we're just gonna wrap that dubbing forward, nice and easy, and just keep pulling it back as I go. Nice touching wraps here. And I like these fibers nice and long, and I like a good thick body, good hefty amount of dubbing on this fly, because it just increases the profile on it, and I like that increased bulk. You're just disturbing more water that way and getting the fish's attention. This is not really a subtle fly. And this is probably my go-to fly for fishing for steelhead and trout at the same time, and kind of just has been my go-to fly this season all year. So yeah, you guys have seen me fish a lot. Wrap it pretty good chunk forward, but I don't like to wrap it all the way up to the bead. This is about perfect for me right here. Leaving a little space, and then get that tied down, put one loop over, move my thread holder out of the way. I like to do two more nice and tight ones. So I'm tying with a 6/0 Vivus thread, so it's pretty thick, pretty strong, and I like that, especially for a fly this size. I can put quite a bit of tension on the line. Now I'm just gonna clean up all that dubbing at the end there, and the next step is to add in our tail, what's gonna really make this a leech. So I am using a pine squirrel zonker strip dyed red. Now, I like to measure this out, and this is one of the places in this fly. Oh, hold on, I forgot. Once I've got the dubbing on there, I like to really brush it out nice and hard. I don't brush it out too hard while it's in the loop, but once it's on here, brush it out nice and hard, and that's really gonna bulk everything up and lengthen out those fibers. You're gonna lose some, but that's part of why I like to start out my loop with a bunch of dubbing in there. Okay, so back to the squirrel zonker. Now, for me, I think the ideal length is such that the end fibers of the tail are just out beyond or about even with the very longest fibers in the dubbing. But this is one of the places where you have the most room for creativity. Now, this looks just about perfect to me. But yeah, if I'm thinking I'm going to be oriented with this particular one more towards steelhead or bull trout, I might tie it longer. If I'm thinking I'm only going to put it for trout, I might tie it a little shorter. So I like to measure it out on the fly here, and then I split the fur like that, so I'm not wasting any fibers. Cut it with the dull scissors right there. And just tie it in on that little bit of blank thread that I left between the dubbing and the bead. And I tie it in slightly angled to my side because it's going to roll onto the top of the fly there. So this is where that strong thread really comes in, is when you're wrapping down a piece of skin like this. You can really pull on it hard and get it in there nice. And you want to tie it skin side up, because these jig flies are going to fish upside down like this. So then when it's like that, you got your fur up. Now the final ingredient I'm tying this one with is some red and black large dot guinea. I've also done it with mallard flank, and I've done it with India hen and partridge, your classic soft hackle stuff. But this is just the one I like the most. They all look good, but I like the stiffness of the fibers on this, and I like the amount of black that is in the fibers too. Red and black is just one of my favorite all-around steelhead trout colors. I think it's just nice and bloody looking. So I just tie it in by the tip here. And for me, the ideal fiber length is so that where I tie it in, it's gonna stretch out to about the curve, the bend of the hook there. Fly tying, all about proportions. Tie it in by the tip here. 2, 3, 4, a good few wraps. Since I don't have that lead wire under there, it's totally fine or even essential to put some bulky thread in the front, because that's going to help me keep that fly in, or keep that bead in place. And then you could just wrap it by hand, but I just throw another 2-turn whip finish in there, and I'm gonna spin it on here. All right, it's gonna look a little bit messy as you spin this hackle on there. I like to do kind of touching wraps forward, and this is another reason to leave that space, is because I'll have the space to wrap backwards from the bead and get all the fibers oriented the way I want them to be. And this just takes some practice. All of this takes practice, but the fly doesn't have to look good to fish good. I'm gonna make this one. We're gonna finish it off right there. Now my preference would be to tie this off so that the stem of the feather is right over the top of the fly. But this particular feather just isn't really mathing out that way. So I'm going with the second best and tying it off so that it's right along the bottom of the bead. And you can put a good few turns in there and pull hard on it. And cut that off. Now we're going to tidy up that collar. Just pull those fibers back and add some nice good turns in here. And I'm using orange because that is my favorite hotspot color, at least for around here. I'm in the Portland, Oregon area. Maybe other colors work better other places, but orange is my go-to. Get that bulked out a little bit, but not too much, because I'm gonna do 2 4-turn whip finishes. So that's gonna add a little bit more to that collar. 3, 4. I like to get that knot right along the top of the bead. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's not the neatest head I've ever tied on a fly, but that is all right. Your flies do not need to look perfect. Snip that off, and now all my fibers are running back in the same direction, and this has about the proportions I like. The tail could be a little longer on this one, but you see that collar comes back to about the curve of the hook. Fibers run further than that. Yeah, I'm gonna pull a couple of those out there, make it a little bit nicer. And then the tail runs out just a little further than that. And our final step is going to be to hit this collar with a little bit of Solarez. I don't really use, so just a UV resin. I don't really use head cement anymore. I think the Solarez is plenty good enough. Or even better. I feel like a lot of times my head cement cracks and looks flaky and looks bad. So put a little bit on there just to strengthen up our knot. And this fly is very durable for me. Sometimes I do find that I will snap the thread on the head, but with that 2-turn whip finish, it's all right. It's not going to fall apart. And these flies will catch, to me, like at the end of the day, a fly is going to fall apart if you catch enough fish. For me, if I can put 50 to 100 fish on a fly, that's excellent durability right there. And this fly can take that. So yeah, I think that looks pretty good. That's going to kick some ass out there. So yeah, tie it up, enjoy. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh, and now that I'm a YouTuber, I gotta say, like and subscribe. I got lots of fishing content and more tying content to come. So you guys will get to see the flies that I actually catch my fish on. Yeah, that looks pretty nice.